The scorching Egyptian sun beat down mercilessly on the ancient stone structures scattered across the vast desert landscape. Somewhere in this forgotten corner of the world stood a pyramid that archaeologists had dismissed. Decades ago, a crumbling monument believed to hold nothing but sand and shattered pottery. But tonight, under the pale glow of a full moon, something moved within those ancient walls. Inside the mystery machine, parked precariously on a sand dune, Velma adjusted her glasses and studied a crinkled treasure map she'd purchased from a street vendor in Cairo for just $5. "According to my calculations," she announced, her voice trembling with excitement, "this pyramid was once the treasury of Pharaoh Quenhotep, a ruler obsessed with accumulating wealth, but who mysteriously vanished along with his entire fortune." "Like fortune?" Shaggy gulped, momentarily distracted from his family-sized bag of chips. "Zoinks, that sounds expensive. And probably haunted." "Raunted?" Scooby whimpered, his tail drooping between his legs. Fred leaned over the driver's seat, studying the map with intense focus. "If there's really treasure in there, we need to be smart about this. Ancient treasures aren't just about gold. They're about historical value, proper documentation, and legal ownership. We can't just grab whatever we find." Daphne nodded enthusiastically, flipping through her tablet. "Fred's right. I've been researching, and several treasure hunters have disappeared near this pyramid over the past month. The locals say a glowing mummy of greed guards the fortune, cursing anyone who dares to touch the pharaoh's wealth without understanding its true value." A bone-chilling howl echoed across the desert, carried by the wind like a warning from the ancients themselves. The sound seemed to vibrate through the sand, through their bones, through their very souls. Scooby leaped into Shaggy's arms, both of them shaking like leaves in a hurricane. "That's just the wind, guys," Velma reassured them, though even she couldn't hide the slight tremor in her voice. "But this mystery is perfect for teaching us about the difference between real wealth and fool's gold. Throughout history, people have lost everything chasing get-rich-quick schemes. We need to investigate this intelligently." The pyramid loomed before them, its entrance a dark mouth that seemed to swallow light itself. Strange hieroglyphics covered the walls, not the typical ancient Egyptian symbols, but what appeared to be mathematical equations and charts that looked suspiciously modern. The air smelled of old stone, mysterious incense, and something else, something metallic and sharp, like freshly minted coins. The morning sun transformed the Egyptian desert into an endless ocean of golden sand, each dune rippling like frozen waves caught in eternal motion. The air shimmered with heat, creating mirages that danced on the horizon like ghostly merchants peddling invisible wares. Palm trees surrounded a small oasis where the mystery machine sat parked, its psychedelic paint job looking almost rebellious against the ancient, timeless landscape. Inside a nearby cafe built from sun-dried mud bricks, Shaggy sat before a feast that would make a pharaoh jealous. Pyramids of pita bread, mountains of hummus, towers of falafel, and enough baklava to feed a small army. His eyes sparkled with unbridled joy as he reached for his wallet, ready to order even more. "Like, waiter, I'll take 3 more orders of everything," Shaggy announced, waving a fistful of Egyptian pounds with reckless abandon. Velma looked up from her archaeological journal, her eyebrows raised in concern. "Shaggy, do you realize you've already spent 200 pounds? That's about 40% of our entire food budget for the week. At this rate, we'll be eating sand by Thursday. Rand?" Scooby's ears perked up nervously. "She means we need to budget, Scoob," Fred explained, pulling out a small notebook where he meticulously tracked their expenses. "When you're on the road solving mysteries, you can't just spend everything in one place. You need to save for emergencies, unexpected equipment, and gas for the van." Daphne sipped her mint tea thoughtfully, her purple headband keeping her red hair perfectly in place despite the desert heat. "It's like investing, Shaggy. If you spend all your money on immediate gratification, You won't have anything left for tomorrow's opportunities or emergencies. But I'm gratified right now, Shaggy protested, his mouth full of falafel. Tomorrow's Shaggy can worry about tomorrow's problems. That's exactly the mindset that leads to financial trouble, Velma said gently, pushing her glasses up her nose. The principle of delayed gratification is crucial for building wealth. Every pound you save today could be worth more tomorrow, especially if you invest it wisely. Scooby nodded sagely, though he was currently sneaking a piece of Shaggy's baklava when his best friend wasn't looking. The cafe owner, an elderly man with a weathered face like cracked leather and eyes that held ancient secrets, approached their table slowly. He leaned on a twisted cane made from gnarled olive wood, each step deliberate and meaningful. His white galabaia fluttered in the breeze that swept through the open-air establishment. "You are the young detectives, yes?" His voice was gravelly, like sand sliding over stone. "I heard you asking questions about the Pyramid of Coinhotep." Fred immediately straightened, his natural leadership instincts kicking in. "Yes, sir. We're here to investigate the disappearances and the rumors about a mummy. Can you tell us anything?" The old man's expression darkened, shadows seeming to gather around his weathered features. "That pyramid is cursed by greed itself. Pharaoh Khenhotep was not like other rulers. He did not build monuments to the gods or ensure his people's prosperity. No, he hoarded every coin, every valuable object in his kingdom. He believed that accumulating wealth was the secret to immortality." "What happened to him?" Daphne asked, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. "He died alone, surrounded by gold but loved by no one. They say his mummy still guards his treasure, cursing anyone who seeks wealth without understanding its true purpose. 3 treasure hunters entered that pyramid last month. Only their empty wallets were found at the entrance. Every pound, every dollar, every valuable they carried, gone, vanished. A chill ran down everyone's spine, despite the oppressive heat. Even Shaggy stopped eating, which was perhaps the most ominous sign of all. Empty wallets? Velma's analytical mind was already processing this information. That's a very specific calling card. Most thieves would take valuable equipment, 2 cameras, tools, watches. Why only the money? Because the mummy of greed only takes what it values most, the old man whispered, his eyes wide with superstitious fear. And it teaches a terrible lesson to those who worship money above all else. Fred pulled out his map, spreading it across the table with practiced efficiency. "Can you show us the safest route to the pyramid? We need to investigate before anyone else disappears." The old man traced a path with one gnarled finger, pointing out landmarks and warning them about quicksand traps and unstable dunes. As he spoke, Velma noticed something peculiar: modern tire tracks leading toward the pyramid, fresh enough that the wind hadn't erased them yet. "Someone's been making regular trips there," she observed quietly, pointing out the pattern. "And recently, too. This isn't ancient history. Something's happening right now." As they left the cafe, Shaggy paused at the counter, looking longingly at the remaining food. Then, with visible effort, he put his wallet away. "Maybe you guys are right. I should save some pounds for later, for emergencies. Or second breakfast, or elevenses. Or—" "We get it, Shaggy," Daphne laughed, patting his shoulder encouragingly. "Small steps. That's how everyone builds better financial habits, one decision at a time." The mystery machine rumbled to life, and they headed toward the pyramid, following the tire tracks through the undulating desert landscape. As they approached, the structure seemed to grow larger and more imposing, its limestone blocks stained by centuries of sand and sun. But something was wrong, very wrong. Modern scaffolding surrounded parts of the pyramid. Generator cables snaked across the sand. Fresh excavation marks scarred the ancient stone. This wasn't an abandoned archaeological site. Someone was actively working here, and they'd gone to great lengths to keep it secret. "Jinkies!" Velma exclaimed, her eyes widening behind her glasses. This isn't a curse at all, this is a crime scene. Someone's running an operation here, and they're using the mummy legend to keep people away. A blood-curdling moan echoed from within the pyramid's entrance, a sound that seemed to combine human agony with something ancient and inhuman. Glowing hieroglyphics suddenly blazed to life on the stone walls, pulsing with an eerie green light that shouldn't have been possible without electricity. "Rummy!" Scooby howled, leaping into Shaggy's arms with impressive agility for a Great Dane. Like maybe we should investigate this mystery from somewhere far away, like, say, America. Or the moon, Shaggy suggested, his knees knocking together audibly. But Velma was already marching toward the entrance, her curiosity overcoming her fear. Mysteries don't solve themselves, guys. I have a feeling this one's going to teach us more about economics than archaeology. Come on, we have a mummy to unmask and a financial fraud to expose. The pyramid's entrance yawned before them like the mouth of some enormous stone beast. The darkness inside so absolute it seemed to have physical weight. Fred clicked on his heavy-duty flashlight, its beam cutting through the shadows, but somehow making the darkness seem even more oppressive. The walls were covered in hieroglyphics, but as Velma studied them more closely, her detective's mind recognized something was fundamentally wrong. "These aren't authentic ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics," she announced, running her fingers over the carved symbols with academic fascination. "Look here. This symbol represents a $, and this one. This is the Bitcoin logo. Someone's created fake, ancient writing that's actually about modern currency. This is brilliant forgery, and completely fraudulent." Daphne pulled out her smartphone, using its light to illuminate another section of wall. Despite the legend of her being a damsel in distress, she'd proven time and again to be observant and intelligent. "These look spray-painted, not carved. See how the edges are too perfect. Real ancient carvings would be irregular, weathered by thousands of years." "Exactly." Velma beamed with professional pride. "Someone's creating an elaborate scam here. They're probably luring treasure hunters and investors with promises of ancient wealth, then stealing their money. It is like a multi-level marketing scheme mixed with archaeology preying on people's desire to get rich quick." Fred studied a section of floor, noticing disturbed dust patterns. "Look at these footprints. Multiple people have been through here recently, some wearing modern hiking boots, others in what look like designer shoes. Not exactly typical archaeologist footwear. Ragnar Rose?" Scooby asked, tilting his head with endearing confusion. "Expensive shoes, buddy," Shaggy translated, somehow understanding his canine companion perfectly. "Like the kind of shoes people wear when they want to look rich, which is like totally not practical for a dusty pyramid." They ventured deeper into the pyramid's labyrinthine corridors, the air growing cooler and more stale with each step. The smell of ancient stone mixed with something else, fresh paint, modern electronics, and the unmistakable scent of greed. Around the corner, they discovered a chamber that made them all stop in their tracks. The room was set up like a modern office, incongruously transplanted into ancient Egypt. Folding tables held laptops, printers, and what appeared to be financial documents. A whiteboard displayed investment charts and profit projections. Brochures were stacked neatly in boxes, their glossy surfaces proclaiming, "Invest in history. Guaranteed returns from Pharaoh's fortune." Velma grabbed one of the brochures, her eyes scanning the text with increasing horror. "This is a pyramid scheme literally and figuratively. They're telling investors they can buy shares in Pharaoh Coinhotep's treasure. For just $10,000, you become a treasure partner with promised returns of 300% within 6 months. 300%? Fred whistled low. That's impossible through legitimate means. Any investment promising returns that high is almost certainly a scam. Daphne picked up a folder marked Investors, flipping through pages of contracts and checks. Look at these amounts. Some people have invested their entire life savings. Retirement funds, college savings, mortgage money. This is devastating. Like, how can people fall for this? Shaggy asked, genuinely confused. I mean, I'm not exactly a financial genius, but even I know that if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Velma sat down heavily on a folding chair, the weight of the discovery pressing on her. That's the psychology of scams, Shaggy. They prey on hope, on desperation, on people's dreams of financial security. They create urgency, invest now before spots fill up, and use social proof. Hundreds have already invested. They make it seem legitimate with fancy brochures and official-looking documents. A sudden sound made them all freeze, footsteps approaching from deeper within the pyramid, accompanied by a strange mechanical humming. The green glow they'd seen earlier intensified, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls like demonic spirits. "Leave this place!" A voice boomed through the corridor, echoing with unnatural resonance. "The mummy of greed curses all who seek the pharaoh's wealth without pure intentions." A figure emerged from the shadows, wrapped in what appeared to be ancient bandages, glowing with that sickly green light, its movements jerky and unnatural. The mummy's eyes blazed like emeralds set in a skull, and in its outstretched hands, it held what looked like modern wallets and cash. Roinks! Scooby and Shaggy screamed in unison, immediately running in the opposite direction with impressive speed considering their usual laziness. But Velma noticed something crucial. The mummy's movements were too mechanical, too precise. And that green glow, she'd seen it before in her chemistry classes. "That's glow-in-the-dark paint." She shouted over the mummy's theatrical moaning. "And I can hear servos." "That's not a supernatural mummy. It's a robot." Fred immediately shifted into action mode, his strategic mind assessing the situation. "Gang, split up. Velma and I'll follow the mummy and see where it goes. Daphne, check those computers and see if you can find information about who's running the scheme." "Shaggy, Scooby, let me guess," Shaggy interrupted with resignation. "We're like the bait again?" "Actually," Fred grinned, "I need you two to search the rest of this chamber. Look for anything that might tell us how they're operating this scam. Check every box, every folder, every corner." The mummy let out another theatrical roar and retreated into the darkness, with Fred and Velma in careful pursuit. Daphne immediately set to work on the computers, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced skill. Despite her fashionable appearance, she'd taken several computer science courses and knew her way around a hard drive. Left alone in the eerie chamber, Shaggy and Scooby looked at each other with mutual dread. "Like Scoob, why do we always get left in the creepy rooms?" Shaggy whimpered, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "Re-won't row," Scooby replied miserably. But duty called, so they began their search, opening boxes with extreme caution, as if each one might contain a cobra or worse. What they found was almost more disturbing than any snake evidence of systematic, calculated fraud. One box contained fake certificates of authenticity for treasure shares. Another held costumes, multiple mummy outfits, masks, and special effects equipment. A third contained stacks of cash, but it was fake, printed on cheap paper, meant to be photographed and shown to potential investors as proof of the treasure's existence. "Zoink, Scoob! Look at this." Shaggy held up a notebook filled with names, amounts, and status updates. "These are all the people they've scammed. Some of these amounts are like $50,000. That's single quotes S double quotes." He paused, trying to do math. "That's a lot of Scooby snacks. Rary rad." Scooby agreed, his usually cheerful face looking unusually serious. Meanwhile, Daphne had cracked the password on one of the laptops. It was depressingly simple, Treasure 123, and was scrolling through files that revealed the full scope of the operation. Email chains showed communication between multiple conspirators. Spreadsheets tracked investments and payouts, mostly the former, very few of the latter. Marketing materials showed how they recruited new investors through social media, fake archaeology websites, and even fraudulent academic papers. "This is sophisticated," Daphne muttered to herself. "They're not just running one scam. They're operating multiple fronts. The pyramid scheme is just one part. They're also selling fake artifacts online, running investment seminars in Cairo hotels, and even have a cryptocurrency called Farcoin that they're promoting. It's financial fraud on multiple levels." A notification popped up on the computer screen, an incoming video call. Without thinking, Daphne accepted it, and a face appeared, a man in his 40s, wearing an expensive suit, sitting in what looked like a luxury office. "Ah, finally checking in," the man said cheerfully. "I was beginning to think you'd abandoned the operation, Ahmed. How many new investors did we?" He stopped abruptly, his face going pale as he realized he wasn't talking to Ahmed. "Who are you?" "Someone who's about to shut down your entire criminal enterprise," Daphne said coolly, her usual sweetness replaced with steel. "You're scamming people out of their life savings, and we're going to expose every single detail." The man's expression shifted from shock to cold calculation. "I don't know who you are or what you think you've discovered, but you're interfering with a legitimate business operation. We have lawyers, connections, and resources you can't imagine. Walk away now, or what?" Daphne challenged, screenshotting his face and hitting record. "You'll send your fake mummy after us? We already know it's a robot. We know about the investment fraud, the fake artifacts, the Farcoin scam. And in about 5 minutes, I'm uploading everything I've found to the cloud, where it'll be safely backed up and out of your reach." The man's face contorted with rage, and he slammed his hand on his desk. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. That treasure is mine. I discovered the location. I developed the business model. I made it all possible. Those investors are just—" The connection suddenly cut off, leaving the screen black. Daphne's heart raced, but her hands remained steady as she continued copying files to her phone. She'd learned long ago that investigating mysteries required courage, and right now, courage meant gathering evidence. A distant crash echoed through the pyramid, followed by Scooby's unmistakable howl of terror. Whatever was happening deeper in this ancient structure, the mystery was far from solved. In fact, Daphne suspected they'd only scratched the surface of a financial conspiracy that reached far beyond this desert pyramid. Fred and Velma navigated the pyramid's increasingly complex corridors, following the mechanical mummy's trail of glowing footprints. The passageways grew narrower, forcing them to walk single file, their flashlights casting long shadows that seemed to reach for them like grasping fingers. The walls here bore different markings, not fake hieroglyphics, but actual construction notes written in modern Arabic and English. "Look at this," Velma said, pointing to a notation on the wall. "Chamber 7 sound system installed. Chamber 12 holographic projectors operational. Additional Chamber 15 pressure plates for scare tactics." This entire pyramid has been retrofitted as an elaborate haunted house, designed to terrify treasure hunters and investors into believing the mummy is real. Fred ran his hand along the wall, feeling seams where modern panels had been inserted into ancient stone. It's actually impressive from an engineering standpoint, morally bankrupt, but technically sophisticated. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars creating this illusion, which means they must be stealing millions to make it worthwhile. They emerged into a vast chamber that took their breath away, not because of ancient grandeur, but because of modern audacity. The room had been converted into a showroom, with glass cases displaying treasures that gleamed under carefully positioned spotlights. Golden statues, jewel-encrusted masks, ornate jewelry, and tablets covered in precious stones filled the cases, creating the illusion of unimaginable wealth. Velma approached one of the cases, her analytical mind immediately spotting inconsistencies. "Fred, these are fakes. Very good fakes, but fakes nonetheless. See how this ancient gold has no patina? Real gold from thousands of years ago would show oxidation, wear patterns, specific aging characteristics. This was probably manufactured in the last few months, so they're showing investors fake treasure to convince them the pyramid holds real wealth, Fred concluded. Classic bait and switch. They promise shares of genuine artifacts, but are really just taking money with no intention of paying actual returns. A door on the far side of the chamber suddenly slammed open, and multiple figures in mummy costumes burst through, their movements coordinated and purposeful. But these weren't robots. These were people, real criminals trying to intimidate them into leaving. "This is private property," one of the mummies shouted, his voice muffled by bandages but clearly modern and decidedly unsupernatural. "You're trespassing. Leave now or face the curse." Fred stepped forward confidently, his natural leadership emanating calm authority. "The only curse here is fraud. We know what you're doing running an investment scam, stealing people's savings, using fear and false promises to manipulate victims. It's over." The mummies hesitated, clearly not expecting such direct confrontation. In that moment of uncertainty, Velma spotted something crucial: a door behind the display cases, partially hidden by a hanging tapestry, with light spilling from underneath. That's where the operations nerve center must be. "Fred, that door," she whispered urgently. Before they could move, one of the mummies reached for something on his belt. Not a curse or supernatural power, but a radio. "We have intruders in Chamber 15. Boss says to activate Protocol Greed." Suddenly, the floor began to vibrate. The glass cases started sinking into the floor, the treasures disappearing into hidden compartments. The lights flickered and changed to a blood-red hue. And most alarmingly, the walls began to close and literally closing in, using hydraulic systems hidden within the ancient stone. "It's a trap room," Fred shouted, grabbing Velma's hand and running toward the hidden door. "Move!" They sprinted across the chamber as the walls crept closer with inexorable mechanical precision. The mummies, apparently not warned about Protocol Greed, also scrambled for exits, their scary costumes becoming obstacles as they tripped over loose bandages. Fred reached the door first, slamming his shoulder against it locked. "Jinkies, we need another way out." Velma frantically scanned the room, her mind racing through possibilities. The walls were now close enough that the space felt like it was being compressed, the air itself seeming thicker. In desperation, Velma noticed the sinking display cases. They weren't just disappearing. They were descending on platforms. "The cases! They lead somewhere below. It's a shaft." Without hesitation, Fred and Velma jumped into one of the descending case spaces just before it closed completely. The platform dropped rapidly, sending them sliding down a dark shaft that spiraled deeper into the earth. They landed with a tumble in a pile of cushions, presumably placed there to protect valuable artifacts during transport, but now serving as an unintentional safety feature for teenage detectives. They found themselves in a massive underground chamber that clearly wasn't part of the original pyramid structure. This was a modern excavation, a hidden facility built beneath the ancient monument. And what they saw here explained everything. The chamber was a full-scale counterfeiting and forgery operation. Machines printed fake certificates, manufactured replica artifacts, and even produced counterfeit currency. Workers in modern clothing operated 3D printers, creating ancient sculptures. A chemistry setup created artificial aging on new objects. Computer stations monitored online accounts and cryptocurrency transactions. "This isn't just an investment scam," Velma breathed, her eyes wide with realization. "This is organized financial crime on an international scale. They're not just stealing from investors. They're flooding the market with fake artifacts, manipulating cryptocurrency values, maybe even counterfeiting money. The pyramid investment scheme is just one revenue stream in a massive illegal operation." Meanwhile, back in the upper chambers, Shaggy and Scooby had finished their initial search and were now nervously exploring deeper into the pyramid, following signs that promised an investor refreshment lounge. Because even in ancient pyramids, apparently, criminals understood the importance of comfortable marks. Like, maybe they have snacks? Shaggy said hopefully, his stomach growling despite the danger. Investigating makes me hungry, Scoob. Ree-roo! Scooby agreed enthusiastically. What they found was indeed a lounge and bizarrely modern space with leather couches, a full bar, and even a flat-screen TV showing promotional videos about the pyramid investment opportunity. The videos were slick, professional, and utterly convincing to anyone without investigative training. They featured fake archaeologists, staged discoveries, and testimonials from actors pretending to be successful investors. Zoinks, this is like a sales pitch, Shaggy realized, watching one of the videos. They're like totally brainwashing people into thinking this is legit. Look at how they use fancy words in official-looking charts. Scooby nosed around behind the bar and discovered something interesting. A hidden door disguised as a wine rack. When he accidentally bumped it with his nose, the entire section swung open, revealing a staircase leading down. Rude Rob Raggy. Like, Scoob, I don't think we should go down there. That's definitely where the scary stuff is, Shaggy protested. But Scooby was already descending, following his nose towards something that smelled suspiciously like Scooby snacks, the organic, expensive kind that came in fancy packaging. Against his better judgment, Shaggy followed, and they descended into a storage area filled with supplies for maintaining the scam costumes props, packaging for shipping fake artifacts, and bizarrely a massive supply of snacks, clearly meant to keep the criminal workers happy during long shifts. Like, evil criminal masterminds really know how to stock a pantry. Shaggy marveled, momentarily forgetting the danger as he surveyed the impressive array of international snacks. But then they heard voices approaching multiple people, speaking urgently about containing the situation and dealing with the intruders permanently. Shaggy and Scooby dove behind a stack of boxes, their hearts pounding so loudly they were certain everyone could hear. 3 people entered the storage area, 2 men in expensive suits and a woman in business attire, all carrying tablets and looking distinctly unlike anyone who belonged in an ancient Egyptian pyramid. The operation is compromised, the woman said coldly, her voice sharp with barely contained anger. Those kids have seen too much. Ahmed says they've accessed the computers, photographed evidence, probably already uploaded it somewhere. We need to implement the shutdown protocol and disappear before authorities arrive. What about the investors? One of the men asked. We have 3 new ones arriving tomorrow, bringing a combined $200,000. Leave them, the woman said dismissively. We've already extracted $12 million from this location. Time to abandon it and activate our backup operation in Peru. I've already had our contacts there preparing a similar setup, different story, different artifacts, but same principles. We'll be running again within a month. Shaggy and Scooby exchanged horrified looks. This wasn't just a local scam, it was international, mobile, and far more extensive than they'd imagined. What about the evidence? The second man asked nervously. If those kids have really uploaded files, we have lawyers and technical teams for that, the woman interrupted. Denial, legal threats, claim it's all fabricated. We've done it before. By the time any investigation gets momentum, we'll have transferred assets through enough offshore accounts that tracking becomes impossible. This is why we diversify, not all our eggs in one pyramid, so to speak. She laughed at her own joke, a sound devoid of warmth or humor. It was the laugh of someone who'd perfected the art of exploiting others' dreams and felt no remorse whatsoever. Shaggy felt something unusual rising within him, not fear, but anger. These people were deliberately, systematically destroying lives, stealing dreams, taking money that represented years of hard work and sacrifice. And they were planning to do it again, in another country, to more innocent victims. "Scoob," he whispered, so quietly only his canine companion could hear. "We need to, stop them." "For real?" Scooby looked at his best friend with surprise. Usually, Shaggy was all about running away, avoiding danger, and letting others handle the heroics. But there was something different in Shaggy's eyes, now determination. Courage born not from fearlessness, but from righteous indignation. "Rhea, let's row Rit," Scooby whispered back, his tail starting to wag with resolve. As the criminals continued their discussion, planning their escape and their next scam, Shaggy noticed something crucial: a fire alarm on the wall, and next to it, a sprinkler system control box. If he could trigger it, the chaos might buy them time and alert others that something was wrong. But as he prepared to move, a hand suddenly grabbed his shoulder from behind, and both he and Scooby nearly screamed. They turned to find Daphne, her finger pressed to her lips in a gesture of silence, her eyes conveying both warning and urgency. She'd somehow found them, tracked them down through the pyramid's twisting passages. She pointed upward, and they understood time to retreat, regroup, and execute a plan that would trap these criminals once and for all. But as they backed away quietly, Shaggy's foot caught on a loose box, sending a cascade of fake artifact packaging tumbling to the floor with a crash that echoed through the chamber like thunder. The three criminals spun around, spotting them instantly, the woman's face contorted with rage. "Get them! Don't let them leave this pyramid." And suddenly Shaggy, Scooby, and Daphne were running for their lives through the ancient corridors, pursued by criminals who had far more to lose than they'd initially realized. The mystery had just become dramatically more dangerous and more important to solve. Fred's voice crackled through Daphne's walkie-talkie as she, Shaggy, and Scooby sprinted through the pyramid's corridors, the pursuing criminals' footsteps echoing behind them. "Daphne, change of plans. We found the main operation center. Meet us at the north entrance. We're going to need everyone for this trap." They burst out of the pyramid's entrance into the blinding Egyptian sunlight, gasping for breath, their hearts pounding like drums. The mystery machine sat waiting, and within moments, the entire gang was reunited, comparing notes and piecing together the full scope of the criminal operation. "Okay, here's what we know." Fred began, pulling out his notebook and sketching a quick diagram. "This isn't just one scam, it's a network. They run pyramid schemes, sell fake artifacts, manipulate cryptocurrency, and probably more we haven't discovered. The ringleaders are planning to shut down this operation and start fresh in Peru. We need to trap them here, now, before they escape." Velma adjusted her glasses, her mind already formulating strategy. They're motivated purely by greed, by the accumulation of wealth without effort or ethical consideration. So we use that against them. We create a scenario where their greed overrides their caution. Like, "You want to make them think there's something even more valuable?" Shaggy asked, catching on. "Something they can't resist?" "Exactly." Velma beamed. "We'll stage a discovery fake evidence of a hidden chamber containing Pharaoh Coinhotep's actual treasure. Real, legitimate artifacts worth tens of millions. Something so tempting they can't walk away, even knowing there are intruders in the pyramid." Daphne was already scrolling through her phone, pulling up images and information. "I can create fake photos of golden artifacts using image editing apps. Make them look recently excavated, dusty, authentic. We'll leave them on one of their computers where they accidentally discover them after we flee in fear." Fred nodded, his trap-building instincts fully engaged. "And while they're distracted searching for this fake treasure chamber, we'll set up actual traps throughout the pyramid. Nothing dangerous, but enough to contain them until authorities arrive. We'll need rope, nets, and we can use their own props and equipment against them. Right about the rummy robot?" Scooby asked, tilting his head. "We reprogram it," Velma said confidently. "I saw the control system in the underground chamber. If I can access it again, I can make the mummy work for us instead of them. Turn their own scare tactics against them. Over the next hour, the gang executed their plan with precision that came from years of mystery-solving experience. Daphne created convincing fake photographs of a hidden chamber filled with genuine ancient treasures, golden sarcophagi, jewel-encrusted ceremonial weapons, tablets covered in precious stones. She made sure the images looked hastily taken, slightly blurry, as if someone had discovered them accidentally and photographed them in excitement before fleeing. The psychology here is crucial, Velma explained as she helped adjust the lighting in one of Daphne's photos. We're exploiting what behavioral economists call scarcity bias and fear of missing out. By making it seem like we discovered something valuable, but we're too scared to investigate further, we create urgency. They'll all think they need to secure this treasure immediately before we come back with authorities or other treasure hunters. Shaggy and Scooby, meanwhile, were tasked with the physical trap setup, a job that suited their unique combination of cowardice and creativity. They strung nets across corridors, positioned buckets of paint above doorways, created false floors over cushion pits, and even rigged several of the mummy costumes to spring out at unexpected moments. Like, it's kind of fun being on the trap-making side instead of the trap falling into side, Shaggy admitted, carefully positioning a rope across a corridor at ankle height. Rhea, much redder, Scooby agreed, his tail wagging as he helped arrange cushions in a pit that would catch but not harm anyone who fell through. Fred worked on the main trap, a complex system in the pyramid's central chamber that would trigger when someone stepped on a specific stone tile. The entire setup was designed around the criminals' predicted behavior. They would rush to find the fake treasure chamber, split up to search faster, and in their greed-driven haste, become careless. The beautiful irony, Fred explained to Velma as they worked, is that we're using the same principle that makes pyramid schemes work. Each person thinks they're going to be the one who gets rich, the one who gets there first, the one who beats the system. That competitive greed makes people act irrationally, take unnecessary risks, and ultimately trap themselves. Velma nodded thoughtfully. It's similar to the economic concept of the tragedy of the commons. When individuals act in their own self-interest, they often deplete or spoil a shared resource. In this case, the resource is the fake treasure we've created, and their competition to claim it first will be their downfall. Once the physical traps were set, Velma descended back into the underground facility, with Fred keeping watch, and accessed the mummy robot's control system. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her years of technical expertise and programming knowledge coming into play. "Got it," she whispered triumphantly. "I've reprogrammed the patrol routes and response protocols. Now, when the criminals trigger certain sensors, the mummy will appear and chase them directly into our traps. I've also set it to record audio and video, so we'll have evidence of everything they say and do." The final phase involved leaving the bait. Daphne, accidentally, left her phone in the lounge area, with the fake treasure photos open in her gallery and a text message conversation visible that read, "Oh my God, you guys. I found something huge in the pyramid. Real artifacts, not their fakes. Chamber behind the north wall. We need to get authorities now before those criminals find it." The message was time-stamped just minutes ago, making it seem fresh and urgent. Then the gang retreated to the mystery machine, positioning it within sight of the pyramid, but far enough away to appear as if they'd fled. "Now we wait," Fred said, pulling out binoculars to watch the pyramid entrance. They didn't have to wait long. Within 20 minutes, the three criminals they'd seen earlier emerged from the pyramid's entrance, along with four others, clearly the rest of their operation team. The woman in business attire was holding Daphne's phone, her face a mixture of anger and avarice. Even from a distance, they could see the heated discussion, the pointing, the body language of people torn between caution and greed. And then, predictably, greed won. All 7 criminals turned and rushed back into the pyramid, their urgency visible in every movement. Hook, line, and sinker. Fred grinned. Let's give them 5 minutes to get deep inside. Then we follow and spring the traps. As they waited, Velma took the opportunity to explain the broader economic lesson. What we're seeing here is a perfect example of why financial education is so crucial. These criminals built their entire operation on exploiting people's financial illiteracy, their lack of understanding about legitimate investment returns, their desperation for quick wealth, their inability to identify fraudulent schemes. So, how do normal people protect themselves? Shaggy asked, genuinely interested. His earlier experience of almost spending all his money on food had made him more receptive to financial wisdom. Several ways, Velma explained, warming to the topic. First, understand that legitimate investments don't promise guaranteed high returns, especially not 300% in 6 months. Real investment returns average around 7 to 10% annually in the stock market, and that's with significant risk and time investment. Second, Daphne added, checking her watch, always verify credentials. Real archaeologists, financial advisors, and investment opportunities have verifiable backgrounds, licenses, and registrations with government authorities. These criminals had none of that, just slick marketing and fake credentials. Third, Fred continued, never invest money you can't afford to lose, and never let someone pressure you into immediate decisions. Legitimate opportunities allow time for research and consultation with trusted advisors. Scams always create artificial urgency. Invest now or miss out forever. Roarth. Scooby chimed in, then looked surprised at himself for participating in the educational moment. Everyone laughed, the tension breaking momentarily. Fourth, Scooby's right to remind us there's a fourth point. Velma smiled. Diversify. Don't put all your money into one investment, no matter how promising it seems. That's basic risk management. And finally, if something feels wrong, trust your instincts. The victims who invested here probably had doubts, but the criminals used psychological manipulation to override those concerns. Time's up, Fred announced, checking his watch. Let's go catch some criminals and shut down this operation permanently. They approached the pyramid quietly, entering through the main entrance with flashlights ready and walkie-talkies set to the same frequency. The trap had been carefully designed with multiple layers, like a properly diversified investment portfolio. Fred had joked earlier, it had redundancies and fail-safes. The pyramid's interior echoed with shouts and running footsteps as the pyramid's interior echoed with shouts as the pyramid echoed with shouts and running footsteps as the criminals searched frantically for the non-existent treasure chamber. Velma's reprogrammed mummy robot was doing its job perfectly, its mechanical moans and glowing appearance driving the criminals toward specific corridors. There, behind that wall, they heard the woman shout, "I can see light! Break through!" What she was actually seeing was a carefully positioned LED light behind a thin section of modern drywall that Fred had installed earlier, completely fake, but convincing enough to someone blinded by greed. Two of the criminals grabbed sledgehammers from their equipment stash and began smashing through the wall. The moment they broke through, they triggered the first trap, a cascade of plastic balls, borrowed from the pyramid's authentic Egyptian ball pit attraction, which was somehow part of their investor entertainment that flooded the corridor, making footing impossible. The two men with sledgehammers fell, sliding helplessly down the corridor on the rolling balls, their arms windmilling comically. "Trap," one of them shouted. "Those kids set traps." But it was too late. The woman and 3 others had already rushed toward another promising corridor, following signs that Velma had helpfully created reading Pharaoh's secret treasury gives in both English and Arabic. This corridor led directly into Fred's masterpiece, the chamber where the floor tile would trigger the main containment system. The woman stepped on it first. Immediately, nets dropped from the ceiling barriers, slid into place at both ends of the corridor, and fell thankfully non-toxic, and actually used in their special effects system. Sprayed from hidden nozzles covering everyone in sticky, immobilizing foam that smelled vaguely of strawberries. Jinkies! It worked! Velma exclaimed from her hiding spot, watching through a carefully positioned mirror system. The two remaining criminals, hearing the commotion and seeing their colleagues trapped, tried to flee back toward the entrance. But Shaggy and Scooby were ready with their specially prepared trap-a-corridor, rigged with dangling scarabs, plastic, purchased from the pyramid's gift shop, that descended on thin wires when a motion sensor was triggered. Scarabs! Ancient curse! One of the criminals screamed, swatting at the harmless plastic toys as if they were real flesh-eating beetles. In his panic, he ran directly into Scooby, who was wearing one of the mummy costumes and standing perfectly still in the shadows. The collision sent both of them tumbling, and the criminal found himself face to face with what he thought was the actual mummy of greed. Ruby, Ruby, Roo. Scooby howled dramatically, playing his part perfectly. The criminal fainted dead away, leaving only one member of the operation still free, the last man who had managed to avoid all the traps through a combination of caution and luck. He stood in the central chamber, surrounded by evidence of his crimes, realizing that escape was impossible. Fred stepped out of the shadows, flanked by Velma and Daphne. "It's over. Your entire operation is documented. Your colleagues are trapped, and the authorities are on their way. We called them before we even set these traps." The man's shoulders slumped in defeat, but then his expression shifted to something calculating, desperate. "Wait. You kids are smart. Too smart to be working for free. How about a deal? I can cut you in 20% of everything. That's over $2 million each. You could buy anything you want, go anywhere. Never worry about money again." Velma stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. That's exactly the kind of thinking that destroys lives. Money without ethics, wealth without wisdom, accumulation without purpose. You know what's more valuable than $2 million? Self-respect, integrity, the ability to sleep at night knowing you haven't destroyed families and stolen dreams. Besides, Daphne added, pulling out her phone, we've already uploaded everything to secure servers, sent copies to legitimate archaeological authorities, financial regulators, and law enforcement in 3 countries. Your operation is finished, and your offer is worthless. And personally, Shaggy chimed in, surprising everyone with his seriousness. I'd rather earn my money honestly, even if it means eating fewer gourmet sandwiches, because Scooby and we've learned that the best things in life aren't about getting rich quick. They're about friendship, doing the right thing, and maybe enjoying a Scooby snack earned through honest detective work. Rhea, Ronest Ruby Racks. Scooby agreed enthusiastically, his tail wagging. The man's face fell as he realized no negotiation would work. He sank to his knees, finally understanding that his pyramid, both literal and figurative, had completely collapsed. From outside, the sound of sirens approached, growing louder with each second. Egyptian police, along with international financial crime investigators that Daphne had contacted earlier, were arriving to take custody of the criminals and begin the complex process of recovering stolen funds and helping victims. The gang walked out of the pyramid into the golden sunset, the ancient structure silhouetted against the orange and purple sky. What had been a place of deception and greed was now just stone and sand, again ancient, enduring and cleaned of its modern corruption. Another mystery solved, Fred said with satisfaction. And another lesson learned, Velma added. Financial fraud doesn't just steal money. It steals hope, security, and trust. That's why understanding economics and finance isn't just about getting rich. It's about protecting yourself and others from those who would exploit ignorance. But their celebration was premature. As they reached the mystery machine, they heard a sound that made their blood run cold, a mechanical humming, growing louder, coming from deep within the pyramid. The mummy robot, still following its programming, emerged from the entrance, its glowing eyes fixed on them, its mechanical arms reaching out. And everyone realized that in the chaos of catching the criminals, they'd forgotten to shut down the robot. The robot mummy lurched toward them with mechanical precision, its LED eyes blazing green in the fading twilight, its bandaged arms reaching forward with servos whirring like an angry mechanical ghost. Shaggy and Scooby immediately reverted to form, screaming and running in panicked circles around the mystery machine. "Like, I thought you reprogrammed that thing, Velma," Shaggy shrieked, diving behind Fred. "I did, but I only changed its patrol routes and recording functions. I didn't shut down its pursuit protocols," Velma admitted, frantically pulling out her tablet. "I need to access its system remotely." The robot was surprisingly fast, covering the ground between the pyramid and their location with alarming speed. Egyptian police officers emerging from their vehicles stepped back in confusion, unsure whether to shoot a mummy or request backup for supernatural threats. "Don't shoot it," Daphne called out. "It's just a robot." "Expensive evidence that we need intact." Fred's strategic mind kicked into high gear. "Scooby, Shaggy, you need to lead it away from the police and back toward the pyramid. Buy Velma time to hack into its system. Like, why is it always us?" Shaggy wailed, but he was already running, with Scooby galloping beside him and the mechanical mummy in relentless pursuit. "Always, Russ?" Scooby echoed, his legs moving in that characteristic cartoonish scramble. They led the robot on a chase around the pyramid's perimeter, occasionally splitting up to confuse its targeting systems. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on the Egyptian authorities, who watched with bewildered expressions as two teenagers and a Great Dane played tag with a glowing robotic mummy while the sun set dramatically over the desert. Velma's fingers flew across her tablet's keyboard, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. The system's encrypted, but it's commercial encryption, not military grade. "I can break through if I ... double quotes." She paused, trying different access protocols. "Got it. I'm in the maintenance interface. Hurry," Fred urged, watching as Scooby and Shaggy were beginning to tire, their circles becoming slower and their breathing more labored. "Almost ... there." Velma's voice rose with excitement. "I just need to access the shutdown sequence. Wait, there's a master override that requires ... a password? What kind of criminal puts a password on a mummy robot shutdown sequence?" "Try Treasure 123, Daphne suggested. That was the laptop password. These criminals weren't creative with security. Velma typed it in. "No ... rejected." "Okay, think like a greedy fraud criminal. What would they use?" She tried several variations. Money, pyramid, gold, pharaoh, all rejected. Meanwhile, Shaggy had climbed halfway up one of the palm trees near the oasis, with Scooby trying desperately to climb up after him, his claws scrabbling against the bark. The mummy robot stood at the base, reaching upward with mechanical determination. "Velma, any time now would be great," Shaggy shouted down. An Egyptian police inspector approached Velma, watching her work with professional interest. "You are quite skilled with technology, young lady. What password might someone obsessed with wealth choose?" Velma paused, thinking about everything they'd learned. The woman who led the operation, her cold dismissal of victims, her statement about diversifying operations. She said something about not putting all eggs in one pyramid. And she mentioned $12 million from this location. ... She typed in 12 million. A CCESS. Denied 12 million. She tried again. Spelled out. Access denied, then it hit her. Wait, in economics, there's a concept called compound interest, where money grows exponentially over time. What if ... She typed. Compound interest. Access granted. Yes. Velma shouted triumphantly, immediately navigating to the shutdown sequence. "Okay, initiating shutdown in 3.2.1. Now, the mummy robot froze mid-reach, its arms extended toward the tree where Shaggy and Scooby clung. The green glow faded from its eyes. The humming of its servos died away, and it simply stood there, an inert collection of machinery and bandages, harmless as a mannequin. Shaggy and Scooby cautiously descended from the tree, approaching the now motionless robot with extreme caution. Scooby sniffed it tentatively, then barked once with satisfaction. "Rut down," he announced proudly. As they returned to the group, they found that the Egyptian authorities had successfully extracted all the criminals from the pyramid's traps. The 7 conspirators sat handcuffed in a row, covered in foam, paint, and the residue of plastic scarabs, their expensive clothes ruined, and their expressions ranging from angry to resigned. The woman who'd led the operation glared at the gang with pure venom. "You stupid kids have no idea what you've done. We had operations in 12 countries, hundreds of investors, legitimate business connections. You've destroyed millions of dollars in stolen money," Velma interrupted calmly, "in fraudulent schemes that destroyed families and ruined lives. You weren't creating value. You were extracting it through deception. That's not business. That's theft with extra steps." Inspector Hassan, the lead Egyptian detective, approached with a folder of documents that Daphne had printed from the criminals' computers. "Thanks to your thorough evidence collection, we can immediately begin recovering funds and identifying victims. The Egyptian government is also working with Interpol and financial regulators in Europe, America, and South America to shut down their other operations." "What about the investors?" Fred asked, genuinely concerned. "Can they get their money back?" Inspector Hassan's expression grew somber. "Some, perhaps most of it. We've frozen the operation's bank accounts and are tracing offshore transfers. However, much has already been spent on this elaborate setup, on luxury lifestyles, and on starting operations in other countries. Full recovery is unlikely, which is why financial education preventing people from falling for these schemes initially is so crucial." Velma nodded. "That's exactly right. The best protection against financial fraud is knowledge. Understanding basic economic principles, recognizing warning signs, and knowing that legitimate wealth is built slowly through work, saving, and wise investment, not through secret treasures or guaranteed returns." A younger police officer approached shyly, holding a notepad. "Miss, I wonder if you could explain something. You mentioned compound interest as the password. What is that exactly?" Velma's face lit up with the joy of teaching. Compound interest is one of the most powerful concepts in finance. It's when you earn interest not just on your original investment, but also on the interest you've already earned. For example, if you invest $100 at 10% annual interest, after 1 year, you have $110. But in the second year, you earn interest on that 110, not just the original 100. Over time, this creates exponential growth. She pulled out a piece of paper and drew a simple chart. Albert Einstein supposedly called compound interest the 8th wonder of the world because of how powerfully it can grow wealth when used properly. Those who understand it, earn it. Those who don't, pay it. Credit card debt is compound interest working against you, while savings and investments are compound interest working for you. So, if these criminals understood compound interest, Daphne added, why did they resort to fraud? Because they wanted the results immediately, Fred answered. Compound interest requires patience, years or decades to see dramatic results. They wanted millions now, not steady growth over time. That impatience, combined with lack of ethics, led them to crime. Shaggy, who had been listening thoughtfully while eating a sandwich he'd pulled from his mysterious infinite pocket, spoke up. So like if I started saving money now, even small amounts, it could grow into something big eventually? Exactly. Velma beamed. If you're young and start saving even modest amounts regularly, investing them in legitimate index funds or savings accounts, compound interest does amazing work over decades. A 20-year-old who saves just $5 a day and invested at an average 7% return would have over $400,000 by retirement. That's the power of time, consistency, and compound interest. Rower 100,000? Scooby's eyes widened comically. That's a rod of ruby racks. Everyone laughed, the tension of the evening finally breaking completely. Even some of the police officers chuckled at Scooby's priorities. As the criminals were loaded into police vehicles, the woman who'd led the operation called out one last time. You know what the real irony is? That treasure Pharaoh Coinhotep's actual treasure, it's real. It's somewhere in this desert, and someone will find it eventually. When they do, they'll become legitimately wealthy, and you kids will have missed your chance. Velma walked over calmly, standing where the woman could see her clearly. You're right about one thing, Pharaoh Coinhotep's story is real. I researched it. You know what I found? Historical records show that Coinhotep died wealthy but miserable. He had gold but no friends, treasure but no family, wealth but no legacy. His fortune was eventually divided among his servants because he had no heirs, no one who cared enough about him to even pretend to mourn. She paused, letting that sink in. Real wealth isn't about accumulation. It's about what you do with what you have. It's about creating value, helping others, building something meaningful. We solved this mystery not for money, but because it was right. And that decision, that principle, is worth more than all the treasure in Egypt. The woman had no response to that. As the police vehicle drove away, carrying her toward justice and hopefully rehabilitation, the gang stood together watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky. Inspector Hassan approached one final time, shaking each of their hands. Your work here has been extraordinary. Not just catching criminals, but protecting vulnerable people and teaching valuable lessons. Egypt is grateful. I understand you travel around solving mysteries. Perhaps you'd consider consulting for our fraud prevention education programs. We'd be honored, Fred said sincerely. Though we usually work for Scooby snacks rather than consulting fees. Ruby racks. Scooby agreed enthusiastically, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. As they prepared to drive away in the mystery machine, Daphne looked back at the pyramid, now quiet and peaceful in the moonlight. You know, it's sad that such an amazing historical monument was used for something so corrupt, but now it can be properly studied and appreciated, Velma said optimistically. Inspector Hassan mentioned that legitimate archaeologists will be examining it. Maybe they'll find real insights into ancient Egyptian economic systems, trade routes, and monetary policies. That knowledge is worth more than any gold. Shaggy started the mystery machine, its engine rumbling to life. Like, where to next, gang? Fred pulled out a map and a letter that had been waiting for them at their hotel. We've got reports of strange happenings at a chocolate factory in Switzerland. Workers claim the ghost of the founder is haunting the production line, and productivity has dropped by 40%. They need investigators who understand both mysteries and business. Chocolate? Shaggy's eyes lit up. Like, I suddenly feel very motivated to solve this next mystery. Roclate. Scooby echoed joyfully. As they drove off into the desert night, leaving the pyramid and its modern corruption behind, Velma made one final observation. You know what today taught me? Economics isn't just about money or markets or investments. It's about human behavior, our hopes, fears, greed, and generosity. Understanding economics helps us understand people, and understanding people helps us solve mysteries, and helps us avoid getting scammed, Daphne added practically, and helps us know when to save our money instead of spending it all on snacks, Shaggy said, though his hand was already reaching for another sandwich. Rhea, Scooby agreed, though he was currently eating from a family-sized bag of chips. The mystery machine's taillights faded into the distance, heading toward new adventures, new mysteries and new opportunities to teach valuable lessons about economics ethics and the importance of using both. knowledge and courage to make the world a little bit better. Behind them, the pyramid stood as it had for millennia, a silent witness to human folly and wisdom, greed and generosity, corruption and justice. The ancient stones held many secrets still, but tonight, at least, truth had prevailed over fraud, and wisdom had triumphed over greed. And somewhere in that vast desert, perhaps Pharaoh Coinhotep's ghost smiled, finally seeing his pyramid used to teach the very lessons he'd learned too late, that true treasure isn't measured in gold, but in integrity, friendship, and the courage to do what's right. 3 days later, the gang sat in a Cairo cafe, the same one where their adventure had begun, enjoying mint tea and watching news coverage of their successful investigation on a television mounted in the corner. The breaking news banner read, "International fraud ring dismantled. Teenage detectives recover millions." The cafe owner, the same elderly man who'd warned them about the pyramid, approached their table with a tray of complimentary baklava. His weathered face crinkled into a genuine smile, years of worry lines rearranging into joy. "I must apologize," he said, setting down the tray. "When I warned you about the curse, I truly believed it was supernatural. I never imagined it was sophisticated criminals using fear to protect their operation. You have done a great service, not just to the victims, but to Egypt itself. We were just doing what needed to be done," Fred said modestly, though his pleased expression betrayed his pride in their work. The cafe owner shook his head. "No, it was more than that. You see, my nephew invested in that pyramid scheme. He gave them his entire savings, £50,000 money he'd been saving for years to open his own restaurant. I thought it was lost forever, that his dreams were destroyed." His eyes glistened with emotion. "This morning, he received word from the police that 90% of his investment will be recovered. His dream lives again because of you." Velma felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the hot tea. "That's exactly why financial education matters so much. Your nephew wasn't foolish. He was hopeful and uninformed. Those criminals were sophisticated, professional manipulators. The fault lies entirely with them, not with their victims. But now he knows what warning signs to look for, right?" Shaggy asked, his mouth full of baklava. If someone promises super high returns really fast?" "Exactly," the cafe owner confirmed. "He's already started researching legitimate investment strategies, reading about diversification and compound interest. He says when he opens his restaurant, he'll manage it with wisdom, not wishful thinking. You taught him a lesson worth more than the money you helped recover." As the cafe owner returned to his other customers, Daphne scrolled through her phone, showing the gang the wave of media attention their case had generated. "Look at this. Financial education organizations in 12 countries are using our case as a teaching example. There are lesson plans being developed, videos being made, entire curricula built around the pyramid scheme pyramid. Rat's wonderful," Scooby exclaimed, his tail wagging enthusiastically. "It really is," Velma agreed, reading over Daphne's shoulder. "But what makes me happiest is this." She pointed to a comment thread where people were sharing their own near misses with scams, how they'd avoided fraud thanks to recognizing warning signs. "We didn't just solve one mystery. We helped countless people protect themselves from future ones." Fred leaned back in his chair, watching the Cairo street life through the cafe's open wall, vendors selling spices and textiles, children playing soccer with a makeshift ball, tourists photographing everything with wide-eyed wonder. "You know what's interesting? Economics is everywhere. Every transaction out there, every decision about what to buy or save or invest, every negotiation over price, it's all economics in action. And that's kinda cool when you think about it," Shaggy mused, surprising everyone with his philosophical tone. "I mean, I always thought economics was boring math stuff. But it's really about people making choices, right? About how we decide what's valuable and what's not." Velma practically glowed with pride. "Shaggy, that's a remarkably sophisticated understanding. Economics is fundamentally about human behavior and decision-making under conditions of scarcity. It's not just money, it's priorities, values, trade-offs, and choices. Ran Ruby Rax. Scooby added helpfully, causing everyone to laugh. Yes, and Scooby snacks. Velma agreed warmly. Even deciding between different snacks involves economic thinking, opportunity cost, marginal utility, and consumer preference theory. Daphne's phone buzzed with an incoming video call. She answered it to find Inspector Hassan, looking pleased and professional in his office. "Ah, I'm glad I caught you before you left Egypt," he said warmly. "I wanted to give you a final update. We've successfully identified 247 victims across 18 countries. Thanks to your documentation, we've recovered approximately 75% of the stolen funds. The remaining 25% was spent on the operation itself, but that's actually a remarkably high recovery rate for fraud cases. What about the other operations?" Fred asked, leaning into the frame. The woman mentioned they had setups in multiple countries. "Shut down," Inspector Hassan confirmed with satisfaction. Authorities in Peru, Morocco, Turkey, and Thailand have raided similar operations based on our evidence. We've arrested 23 additional conspirators. It was a massive international fraud network, and you kids took down the keystone that brought the whole structure crashing down. What happens to the criminals now? Velma inquired, her sense of justice requiring closure. Multiple trials across various jurisdictions. The ringleaders face significant prison time, likely 10 to 15 years, plus restitution requirements. They'll spend their sentences in prison and their post-release years paying back what they stole. It's appropriate justice. They'll learn the hard lesson that crime doesn't pay, especially white-collar fraud in the digital age where everything leaves traces. After ending the call, the gang sat in comfortable silence for a moment, processing everything they'd accomplished. The television continued playing news coverage, now showing interviews with grateful investors who'd recovered their life savings. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Daphne said thoughtfully. "That woman's final comment about the real treasure. Do you think there actually is a Pharaoh Coinhotep's treasure somewhere out there?" Velma adjusted her glasses, considering the question academically. Historically, it's possible. Many Egyptian treasures remain undiscovered. But here's the thing. Even if we found it, it would belong to Egypt, to museums, to humanity's shared cultural heritage. It wouldn't be ours in any monetary sense, and honestly, I'm okay with that. The real treasure we found was justice, recovered funds for victims, and potentially preventing countless future frauds through education. That's surprisingly deep, Velma, Shaggy said with genuine admiration. You re-saying the real treasure was the friends we made and the justice we delivered along the way. I know it sounds cliché, Velma smiled, but clichés become clichés because they contain truth. We gained experience, knowledge, satisfaction, and the gratitude of people whose lives we helped save. Those intangible assets have value that can't be measured in gold or dollars. Intangible assets. Scooby attempted, struggling with the vocabulary but earning affectionate pats from everyone. Fred pulled out his expense ledger, something he'd been diligently maintaining throughout their Egyptian adventure. Speaking of assets and finances, let me give you all a final economic lesson from our trip. We spent approximately $3,000 total on this investigation. Fuel, food, accommodations, supplies. In return, we helped recover over $9 million for victims. That's a return on investment of about 300,000%. Though we didn't keep any of it, Daphne noted with a smile. Exactly, Fred agreed. Which proves another economic principle. Not all value is monetary. We invested time, energy, and resources. We received satisfaction, experience, and the knowledge that we made a positive difference. That's an excellent return by any meaningful measure. Shaggy stood up, stretching contentedly. Well, I think we deserve a celebratory feast. Nothing says solved mystery like a massive meal. Rhea, Relibration Reest. Scooby jumped up enthusiastically. Shaggy, Velma said with mock seriousness. Don't you think we should budget for our trip to Switzerland? We'll need resources for the chocolate factory investigation. Shaggy paused, actually considering this seriously. You know what? You're right. How about this? I'll only order half of what I usually would, and we'll set aside the savings for investigation expenses. That's like budgeting and planning ahead, right? Velma beamed with pride. Shaggy, I'm genuinely impressed. That's exactly the kind of financial thinking that builds long-term security. Small sacrifices now for greater benefits later. Plus, Shaggy added with a grin, Switzerland has chocolate. I'm like investing in future snacking opportunities. As they walked through Cairo's bustling streets toward a restaurant, they passed the street vendor where Velma had originally purchased the map that started their adventure. The vendor recognized them from the news coverage and called out excitedly, "The detectives! You exposed the pyramid scammers!" He rushed over, shaking their hands enthusiastically. "Please, let me give you these small gifts, authentic Egyptian scarabs, blessed for good fortune and wisdom." He pressed small wrap packages into each of their hands. Velma accepted hers graciously, examining the carved stone scarab with genuine appreciation. "These are beautiful, thank you. But we have to ask, are they really authentic ancient artifacts? Because if so, we couldn't accept them. They belong in museums or with proper collectors." The vendor laughed heartily, his belly shaking with mirth. "You are honest detectives indeed." No, these are modern replicas, made by local artisans. Beautiful craft, but only 50 years old, not 5,000. I sell them as souvenirs, always truthful about what they are. After what happened at the pyramid, many of us street vendors have committed to honesty. No more exaggerating, no more calling new things ancient. Your investigation taught the whole community a lesson. That's wonderful, Daphne said warmly. Honest business practices benefit everyone. Sellers build lasting reputations, and buyers can trust what they're purchasing. It's a win-win economic relationship. Exactly. The vendor agreed enthusiastically. And you know what? My sales have actually increased since I started being completely honest. Tourists appreciate transparency. They buy more when they trust me, and they recommend my stall to their friends. Honesty isn't just moral, it's good business. That's another crucial economic principle, Velma explained to the group as they continued walking. Information asymmetry, when one party in a transaction knows more than the other, can create short-term gains for the informed party. But in the long run, markets reward transparency and punish deception. Honest businesses survive and thrive. Fraudulent ones eventually collapse. They reached the restaurant, a family-owned establishment with aromatic spices wafting from the kitchen and cheerful Egyptian music playing softly in the background. The owner seated them at a large table by the window, offering them menus with photos of each dish. "Before we order," Fred suggested, "let's each share one lesson we learned from this mystery. Something we can take with us to the next investigation and beyond." Velma went first, her academic nature making her comfortable with formal reflection. "I learned that economic education is genuinely life-changing. Knowledge about finance, investment, and recognizing scams isn't just academic, it's practical protection. I want to incorporate more financial literacy into how we explain our mysteries. Maybe even start a blog or video series about economics and critical thinking." Daphne nodded thoughtfully. "I learned that technology and old-fashioned detective work complement each other perfectly. Being able to hack into their systems, analyze data, and understand their digital footprint was just as important as physical investigation. In our increasingly digital economy, understanding technology isn't optional, it's essential." Fred leaned forward, his leadership instincts evident. "I learned that the best traps aren't just physical, they're psychological. Understanding what motivates people, what they fear and desire, what makes them act irrationally. That's the key to both catching criminals and helping potential victims avoid manipulation. Human behavior is the foundation of both economics and detective work. Everyone turned to Shaggy, who looked momentarily uncomfortable being the center of attention. Like, I learned that having self-control with money is actually freedom, not restriction. I always thought being careful with cash was boring and limiting. But seeing those investors lose everything because they couldn't resist a too-good-to-be-true offer, man, that's the real limitation. Being smart with money means you have more choices, not fewer. Rag is right. Scooby chimed in, then paused, thinking hard about his own lesson. Relearn ... Reconomics isn't just for rumans. Reverend dogs read to understand Ralu and Roses. Everyone laughed, but Velma nodded seriously. Scooby's actually onto something profound. Every living creature makes economic decisions: where to hunt, what to eat, how to allocate energy. Economics is fundamentally about decision-making under scarcity, and that applies universally. Scooby, you're a natural economist. Scooby puffed up with pride, his chest expanding and his tail wagging furiously. They ordered their meal. Though true to his word, Shaggy ordered significantly less than usual, demonstrating real growth in his financial discipline. As they ate, they continued discussing economics, mysteries, and the intersection of both. You know what's fascinating? Velma said between bites of kushari. Every mystery we solve has economic components. The haunted amusement park was about property values and inheritance. The ghost at the museum was about art forgery and insurance fraud. The monster at the factory was about labor disputes and automation fears. Economics explains so much of human motivation. So, we're not just mystery solvers, Shaggy mused. We're economic detectives, too. Precisely, Velma agreed enthusiastically. Crime almost always has an economic motive: greed, desperation, protecting assets, seeking gain. Understanding economics helps us understand crime, which helps us solve mysteries faster and more effectively. Daphne pulled out her tablet, opening a document she'd been working on. Actually, I've been thinking about that. What if we created a mystery solver's guide to economics? Each chapter could cover a different mystery we've solved and the economic principles involved. We could help other young people understand both detective work and financial literacy. That's brilliant, Fred exclaimed. We could include practical tips, warning signs for scams, basic investment principles, budgeting strategies, all explained through real mysteries we've solved. And include recipes, Scooby suggested hopefully. And include recipes, Velma agreed with amusement. Maybe a section on food economics, understanding costs, planning meals, budgeting for groceries. That would actually be useful. As their meal continued, the conversation flowed naturally from economics to their upcoming Swiss adventure, from chocolate factory business models to the history of Swiss banking, from Scooby snacks to cryptocurrency. The cross-pollination of mystery solving and economic education felt natural, even inevitable. Toward the end of the meal, a young girl approached their table shyly, holding a newspaper with their photo on the front page. Excuse me, ... Are you the detectives from the pyramid? That's us, Daphne said warmly. What's your name? Amina, the girl said softly. My father almost invested in that pyramid scheme. He was going to use money he'd been saving for my education. But the day before he planned to invest, you exposed it as fraud. You saved my future. The table fell silent, the weight of her words settling over everyone. This wasn't abstract justice or theoretical economics. This was a real child whose life had been genuinely saved by their actions. Velma knelt down to Amina's level, her eyes serious but kind. Amina, I want you to remember something important. Education is one of the best investments anyone can make. It's an investment in yourself that nobody can ever take away. Study hard, learn about math, science, economics, critical thinking. Knowledge is the treasure that actually matters. I will, Amina promised solemnly. I want to be a detective like you someday. Or maybe an economist. Or both. Why not both? Fred smiled. The world needs people who understand both investigation and economics. Promise us you'll study hard and think critically about everything you learn? I promise. Amina beamed, hugging her newspaper photo like a treasure map to her future. As she ran back to her family's table, Shaggy wiped at his eyes with his napkin. Like, is someone cutting onions in here? Because I'm definitely not crying. Roar crying, Scooby observed accurately, though his own eyes looked suspiciously moist. We all are, Daphne admitted, not bothering to hide her tears. That's what makes all of this worthwhile. Not the news coverage or the recognition, but knowing we genuinely helped people, especially kids like Amina who now have futures that almost got stolen. As they finished their meal and prepared to leave, the restaurant owner refused to accept payment. You have given Egypt a great gift, he insisted. This meal is my small thank you. Besides, he added with a wink, having famous detectives eat at my restaurant is excellent advertising. Very good for business. See? Economics. They laughed, thanked him profusely, and stepped out into the Cairo evening. The city glowed with lights, alive with commerce and conversation, a living example of economics in action. Millions of individual decisions, creating a collective tapestry of trade, work, and community. The mystery machine sat waiting where they'd parked it, looking distinctly out of place among Cairo's traffic, but somehow fitting perfectly into the international spirit of the city. As they climbed in, Fred pulled out their roadmap, tracing the route to their next adventure. Switzerland is about 4,000 kilometers from here, he calculated. If we average 500 kilometers per day with stops for sightseeing and rest, that's about 8 days of travel. We'll pass through fascinating places. We could stop at historical sites, learn about different economies, maybe solve a mystery or two along the way. That sounds awesome, Shaggy said, already planning potential food stops, but educational. And budget-conscious. Run. Scooby added enthusiastically. As the mystery machine rumbled to life and they pulled out into Cairo traffic, Velma took one last look at the pyramid in the distance. Illuminated by spotlights for the first time in weeks, no longer a hiding place for fraud, but returned to its rightful role as a monument to history and human achievement. You know, she said thoughtfully, Pharaoh Kinehotep's real treasure wasn't gold or jewels. It was the lesson his story teaches, that accumulating wealth without wisdom, without compassion, without purpose, leads to a meaningless existence. The real treasure is understanding that simple truth. Deep, Shaggy acknowledged. But also true. Very true, Fred agreed, navigating through traffic with practiced skill. And it's a lesson we'll carry with us. Every mystery we solve, every person we help, every scam we expose, we're building a different kind of wealth. The kind that actually matters. Daphne pulled up her tablet one more time, showing them the draft outline for their Mystery Solver's Guide to Economics. The table of contents included chapters on pyramid schemes, how to spot and avoid financial fraud, compound interest, the eighth wonder of the world, diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one pyramid. Opportunity cost, choosing what to give up, supply and demand, understanding market forces, budget basics, planning for adventures and life investment fundamentals, growing wealth wisely, scam psychology, why smart people fall for fraud, economic history, learning from ancient mistakes, financial independence, freedom through knowledge. This is going to help so many people, Velma said with quiet satisfaction. More than we'll ever know. As they drove through the Egyptian night, heading toward new mysteries and new adventures, the gang felt a deep sense of accomplishment. They'd solved another mystery, yes, but more importantly, They'd made a real difference in real lives. Behind them, Cairo faded into the distance, its lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Ahead lay Switzerland, chocolate, and whatever mysterious happenings awaited them there. But in this moment, driving through the desert under a canopy of stars, they were content. Scooby rested his head on Shaggy's lap, already half asleep. Shaggy stroked his best friend's ears gently, his own eyes growing heavy. Daphne and Velma were already planning their Swiss investigation, their voices a soft murmur of friendship and collaboration. Fred drove steadily, confidently, leading them toward whatever came next. And in the back of everyone's mind was the understanding that they'd learned something valuable, not just about economics or fraud or investigation techniques, but about the true meaning of wealth, the real value of knowledge, and the genuine treasure of using your skills to help others. The Mystery Machine's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the road ahead one stretch at a time, just as knowledge illuminates life's path one lesson at a time. "Hey guys," Shaggy said sleepily. "Thanks for teaching me about money and saving and all that stuff. I know I joke around a lot, but I actually really appreciate it." "That's what friends do," Fred replied warmly. "We help each other grow. Ran reet ruby racks," Scooby added, his tail giving one final satisfied wag before sleep claimed him completely. Everyone laughed, the sound carrying out into the desert night, the sound of friendship, of shared purpose, of mystery solved and lessons learned. And somewhere in that vast Egyptian desert, perhaps the spirit of Pharaoh Quenhotep finally rested in peace, knowing that his pyramid had ultimately taught the very lesson his life had failed to learn, that true wealth lies not in gold, but in wisdom, integrity, and the courage to do what's right. The adventure was complete. The mystery was solved. The lesson was learned. And the gang drove on toward tomorrow's mysteries, carrying with them the most valuable treasure of all knowledge shared. Friendship deepened, and the understanding that economics isn't just about money. It's about life itself.